Well, welcome. My name is Elizabeth Larson, and I'm the editor and publisher of Lake County News. And tonight I'm sitting down for a discussion with the two candidates seeking to become Lake County's next assessor recorder. I'm joined by Richard Ford and Sorna Lee Jordan. Over the next roughly hour, we're going to go through a number of topics. I want to hear what their goals are for the office. And we also want to discuss a little bit more about what the Assessor Recorder's Office does. It's not an office that comes up a lot as a contested race. So we'll get a chance to hear their thoughts about that office and what they'd like to do in it. Tonight is the first in-studio event that we've done like this in partnership with our new sister company, Canocti Broadcasting Company. So we're going to get started. It's going to be sort of a usual format for us with a few modifications. This is a discussion, but it's a little bit of a debate too. And we're going to ask each of them to weigh in and give them a chance to rebuttal and do rebuttal and follow up as we go. So we're going to start with, we're just going to go in alphabetical order, but we are going to go back and forth. So we're going to start with just 2-minute introductions and what later have a 2-minute closing. So we're going to start with Richard, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you've decided to run, and what people should know about you as a candidate for Assessor Recorder.
Sure. My name is Rich Ford. The Office of Assessor Recorder is one of the 3 core financial offices within the county structure. The Assessor Recorder assesses the value of the property, and then it's passed to my current office, which is the Auditor Controller's Office, for the calculation of the taxes, and then it's passed through to the Treasurer Tax Collector for collection of the taxes and the billing of the taxes. The office has faced some challenges in the last few years. They lost over 100 years of experience. Of course, when the economy wavered, essentially more work with less ability to do the work is what this caused. An experienced appraiser does anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 records per year. A non-experienced appraiser does a few hundred. I feel a training environment that utilizes cross-training, employees training employees, and external training will help bring the knowledge back to the office and the experience, as well as the development of a policy and procedures manual to help train new employees. Employees have a tendency to stay where they are learning. The office has also had a challenge retaining employees. Many of the counties around us pay far more for the same positions. It has been hard to compete with these counties in a financial basis. My plan to solve this problem is to hire locally whenever possible. Employees that are grounded in the community where friends and family live have a tendency to stay in the same job. So why does the skills of an accountant apply to this office? The assessment of real property uses fair market value, income generated, or cost accounting. These techniques are familiar to an accountant. I have 20 years of accounting experience. I'm currently the Assistant Auditor Controller. I have a degree in accounting from Cal State Dominguez Hills. I have an MBA from Cal State Northridge. Performing audits business each year is a state requirement. The auditor appraiser position has a requirement that you have to either have an accounting degree, be a CPA, or take a proctored exam showing a high degree of accounting knowledge to perform those. They are required. Thank you very much.
Sorna.
Hi, good evening. First off, I want to thank Elizabeth and all the people that went into providing us this opportunity. As you are probably aware, my name is Sorna Lee Jordan. I'm a Hidden Valley Lake resident. I've been in this county for upwards of 3 years, and my family has been in the county upwards of 12. As a result of my breadth of experience in a variety of different fields, I was approached by some community members to run for this office when they learned that Doug Wacker, who is the current assessor recorder, would not be seeking office again. I think it's very important that we understand exactly what this position is about. It is one of the most fundamental positions within county government. If we do not handle the assessments of property correctly, it impacts services throughout the county. Equally, the other side of this position is the recorder position. The recorder position is responsible for maintaining all of the documents that the citizenry is required to present, such as marriage certificates, death certificates, title deeds, etc. If these documents are not handled correctly, that also impacts the citizenry. So while this is one of those offices that many people don't know about and very rarely need, when they do need them, and they need them well. As a result of my background in legal and IT, as well as my background in finance, accounting, and economics, I think that it is very important that that this position be housed by somebody who has a multitude of experience. Furthermore, it is necessary that we understand all of the aspects of this job, that it's not limited to one particular field, that you have to apply legal analysis on a daily basis when you're dealing with Prop 13 and Prop 8, which is the primary laws that govern how property assessment is done. It's also important that we understand the recording laws, what records can be released, how can they be released, to whom can they be released. Again, that's all legal-based analysis for which I'm qualified.
So we're going to move into the questions now, and we're going to start with Sorna. It's January 2015. 3 months from now, we're looking into the future. It's not that far away. It's January 2015. It's the first week of January. You've just been sworn in, taking your oath along with all the other candidates, and before the Board of Supervisors, you go back to your office, you sit down at your desk in the Assessor Recorder's office. What's the first thing you do? What are your priorities?
So the first thing I do, if I haven't already done it, which I would have expected to have done, is make sure that I've introduced myself to everybody, make sure that I know what everybody's position is and what they understand their position to be. I do know many of the people over there already, so that's not necessarily going to take very long, but it is a matter of making sure that we have those conversations and everybody's on the same page. Most importantly, in terms of the priority, it's really looking at workflow. As most of you probably know by now, there really is a lack of staff in the Assessor Recorder's office. We've lost quite a number of staff members to retirements. There is a challenge retaining staff members, and there is quite a lot of experience that has left with those staff members that have left. So my position is that the way you address that is you do that with workflow process. You look at how things are being done, the order in which they're being done, and whether or not there is another way that it can be done that will still accommodate what needs to be handled for staff, accommodate what needs to be handled for citizenry, is still legally permittable, still maintains checks and balances, but does not have so much redundancy that it causes a backlog, and which is what is going on at this moment. So that is the primary goal, is looking at how the process is going and how can we readjust that process so that we can get through the number of files that currently need time and attention, as well as not continue to increase that backlog.
Richard.
Sure. So I think on day one, I think the first thing I would ask of the staff would be to immediately document what they do. Essentially document what the roles, what the tasks are that they do immediately. That would be the first step of preparing a master policies and procedures manual. That would be a live document. You'd be improving on it continually. The second thing I would do is conduct interviews of all the staff, each one individually, to get their feelings on the office, where they think the strengths are, where they think the weaknesses are, where they think we can improve, get their input. I also would immediately put together a list of terms that we want to start basically training as a group, and assign the first employee something to go off, study it, and come back to teach us on that following Friday. The third thing I would do, or next thing I would do, would be set some goals. A 1-month goal, a 3-month goal, and a 6-month goal. Within the 6 months, we're going to have to roll the rollover. So, and that's going to come in the summer. So we're going to have to set some goals immediately if we're going to have any chance of actually doing that in a reasonable manner. But I think it's immediate. The immediate thing is to get with the staff. They know, they've been there forever. A lot of them know where the weaknesses are, and they probably have some input on how they think things can be done better. I think it's important to take that input first before you go off and make any decisions on your own. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Richard.
Sure.
Over the last several years, it seems like the Assessor Recorder's Office has really sort of been ground zero for what's happened with foreclosures, property values. Of course, they tally the tax roll, which determines how much property tax goes into the county coffers. And of course, that has also resulted in a huge number of requests for property value reassessments. You both mentioned this so far, so I'd like both of you to discuss this a little bit more in depth. about how you propose to address that backlog, because it's pretty big. There's a lot of these cases that go before the Board of Supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Wacker has talked about the number that he has, and of course the issue with staffing has come up. So how do you propose to address that backlog specifically?
Sure. I think the easiest way, or the best way to address it, is through training. It does us no good, essentially, to just kind of rush through this without proper knowledge. The office basically operates on knowledge. It operates on knowledge on how to do the calculations, what approach you're going to use on doing those assessments. There is a backlog, but I don't think it's appropriate to actually approach that backlog in kind of a hurried approach just to try and get it out the door. Because all that is going to happen is just going to come back in appeals. The overall goal in my mind is you start training immediately from day one. You start getting the group involved, you start bringing the training in, you start cross-training, and you start bringing the external knowledge back through external training. The Board of Equalization has a lot of training and documents that are available to the group. We just need to bring some of that information back home. I don't think in short term, I think in long term. I don't think that you should rush into the situation. Yes, we do have a backlog. Yes, it does need to be addressed. But the problem is we live in California. This scenario with foreclosures and everything has happened numerous times. It will happen again, I predict, because it has various times through my lifetime. I want to prepare the office not just for this challenge, to overcome this challenge, but prepare for the future. That's what I think is very important. I think you need to take a long-term view, and you need to bring the knowledge and experience back to the office. Thank you.
Sorna.
So I think it's important to understand that there's actually two separate backlogs. There's the appeals backlog, where individuals have requested a Prop 8 reassessment and do not agree with the value that the Assessor Recorder's Office has determined. And that backlog is huge. And then there's a secondary backlog, which are those people who have purchased properties within the last 2 and 3 years who still are waiting for those assessments to be modified within the tax rolls so that what they pay at property tax time is actually relative to the property that they purchased, not the prior seller's property value. So keeping that in mind, when you look at first the appellate issues, I think what needs to happen in that regard is we need to look again at process. But more importantly, we need to look at why are those assessments sitting in, why are those appeals, sitting in the Board of Supervisors chambers waiting for that to be addressed, and what of those can we return back to the assessor's office, relook at, and possibly come up with a amenable situation to get them off of the table. Make them so that everybody is as happy as they can be. No one's going to be perfectly happy. It's an objective of as happy as they can be. Also, I think it's important to look at how many of those are stagnant. How many of those appeals that are currently backlogged are situations where people have given up, that they haven't been provided proper notice or haven't responded to the proper notice. And we need to possibly look at giving those individuals one more chance to accomplish that goal. Secondarily, when it comes to the property taxes of those people who are sitting waiting for 2+ years for those adjustments, we need to look at those as well. We need to figure out, why is that taking so long? Why are there still, even today, people who are looking up their tax rolls and going, wait a minute, that's not the owner and he hasn't been for 2 years. That's not acceptable. We need to look at how we're doing it and how can we do it differently so that we can have a higher morale within the office and more appropriateness. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up or rebuttal?
I'll follow up a little bit. Maybe 2 minutes?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, so I do think it's key and important to look at the processes, but I just want to emphasize that I don't think this is a short-term problem. And the reason this problem occurred was basically because you had 100+ years of experience leave the office, who are high-volume producers. Now you hire back a couple people that can do a couple hundred at a time annually, and then you turn around and you have a foreclosure scenario with a bunch of Prop 8s increase in volume. That's essentially what caused the problem. That will occur again in California again. My goal is to prepare the people for not just this scenario, but for any future scenarios. I definitely am not taking a short-term view on this. Thank you.
Follow-up or rebuttal?
Sure. I don't think workflow process is short-term. In fact, if anything, workflow process is long-term. When you look at workflow process, you look at how the things happen within the office. You look at them from positional standpoints, not individual standpoints. When you're talking about training, you train that individual to do better at what they're doing, and as long as they're happy, you retain the value of that training. But when our surrounding counties have 2, 3, 4 times the income value that our county has, you, in essence, give them an opportunity to get the training necessary to turn around and leave our county, putting us back at square one. When you look at workflow process, it's not going to matter who that individual is, it's going to matter how the work is handled. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, we'll start with Sorna. While Lake County is a great place to live and work, the recruitment issue, which both of you also have mentioned so far, is a big one for all county departments, and again, it's also been a big one for the assessor reporter. Do you have a plan for getting and keeping high-quality employees? If so, what's your plan?
So my plan is to look at, again, where the workflow process is, what are the individuals in terms of positionally that is necessary to help smooth out the office, and then look at what surrounding agencies might be able to co-work with us in identifying those individuals. For instance, Mendocino College, junior college here, has an excellent real estate program. Those are individuals who are looking to get into this field. We have an opportunity to look at those people, to talk to those people, and make them aware of those openings. They still have to go through the HR process. They still have to be vetted accordingly. This isn't about giving anybody preferential treatment, but it is about letting people know that the jobs exist, that this is what they can do with that real estate experience, and basically getting them in at the ground level when they're in the best position to be able to afford those lower salaries and still live comfortably, before they have a spouse and 2 children and a mortgage and all of that. The up-and-coming people who we can bring in, train, and because we have given them that opportunity and the morale within the office, are more likely to stay. One of the things that we talk about here in Lake County is what you pay for, and one of the things we pay for is our gorgeous lake and how we can have such a quality of life here that's not available in other areas. And that comes at a cost. Everything has a check and balance. But when you can give people that opportunity, when you can give them hope, when you can show them that there's a reason to be here, then they are going to stay. And it's really identifying those individuals and looking at where we can tap into those resources. Also looking at 900-hour positions and internships so we can get some of that experience out there without it costing us too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Sure. So how I intend to address the retention issue. First step is hire locally. There's some open positions currently now. I do think it's very important that you hire locally, partly because the other counties do pay quite a bit more than we do. There has not been raises, CPI or COLA increases for many, many years, and because of that, the counties surrounding us actually pay more for the same positions. I'm not naive in thinking that we're going to compete with those counties, or somehow we're going to walk in there and convince the board that we're going to bring us up to market rate on those positions. But I do think if you hire locally and you develop a situation where the person is learning, I know many times I've stayed at different jobs where I could have made more money elsewhere. I stayed in the position because I was learning and because I felt I was growing as in my knowledge, and I think that's why it's very important to keep this office with a kind of world-class training environment where people feel like they're learning, people feel like that they're learning and being able to keep growing, because they know if they keep growing, they know they're going to be happy. People are much happier when they feel like they're growing. I think that's very key. As far as on the financial side, I definitely would be lobbying for flex positions. I definitely also would be lobbying for 900-hour employees. I think is a great idea. But I also am not naive to think that that's going to possibly happen. I mean, that might not happen, and I need to plan accordingly, and I need to plan as if none of that happens. My way to plan if none of that happens is hire locally and train and give them knowledge and give them ability to grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you have any follow-up? Or?
I did not.
Okay.
No,
Anything else? Okay. We're going to go to Richard next on the next question. So let's talk about budgeting.
Sure.
It's a key task for every department head.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not just about numbers though, and especially right now in Lake County's history, you need to have a lot of creativity to work with really limited resources. Every department has had to make cuts, has had to scale back budgets and personnel because of the recession. So when you're looking ahead at how you would address the assessor recorder's budget, what will be your priorities?
I think my key priority is make sure no additional cuts happen to the office. I've prepared many budgets in the past. The last budget I prepared was about $153 million. Comparable to the county government, that's about, I think we're in the 180, so it's almost comparable to that. In preparing a budget, one of the key ways to prepare a budget is make sure you have defense for the things you're requesting. So if you're requesting office supplies, make sure you have defense for why you're doing that. You're requesting a particular person to get a flex position, make sure you've got defense for why that matters. Either we're going to bring this person into a market rate by having the flex position, or we're going to provide them with additional growth. I think those are the priorities when you actually budget. It has to be very clear, it has to be very defensible, and there has to be complete clarity in it. That's the way you prepare a budget, and that's the way you monitor your budget. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Forgive me, Elizabeth. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. For looking at your budget priorities as assessor recorder, budgeting not just about numbers, but also about creatively approaching scale back resources and personnel. So as assessor recorder, what would be your priorities in addressing the office's budget?
So my priorities in addressing the budget is looking at what resources have already been allocated, what resources have not been utilized in the past, and what technology, which is already in the budget, that we could use to help streamline. I'm not looking to increase the budget on technology. I'm looking to use the technology we already have and the budget line items that already exist. Certain items, such as new cameras, for instance, have been something that have been in the budget and have yet to be purchased. These are things that would really make a big difference to staff. So it's looking at that from a standpoint of how can we use the few dollars that we have, maximize them appropriately, look at how thrift spending can work, look at how we can identify certain specifics that will accomplish what we need to do. There are certain limitations within county government. There are certain vendors that you're basically required to work with. There are certain limitations within that. But it's also paying attention. It's paying attention to what different resources and sales and ideas are out there and taking advantage of those at that time. Looking at doing that research, making sure that what you're purchasing is not just the best on the market, but is the most cost effective. What's your ROI? Are you going to get what you need out of it, and how long is it going to last? So that, in terms of technology, in terms of looking at itemization, is very important. It's also important to look at what are we doing? What are we using? How much is our office supply budget? Is that nearly necessary for it to be that much? Is there other ways that we can look at different ideas that exist now that might streamline some of that as well? So I think it really is about looking at how we can renegotiate what we have within our pot so that everybody has a bit of it and everybody has a bit of it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, did you have any follow-up?
No, actually I don't think so.
Any other thoughts from you on
No, thank you.
budget? Okay. So we'll go back to you for the next question. Okay. The assessor recorder, as an elected official, doesn't answer to the Board of Supervisors like other department heads do. But the board does have final say on the office's budget. Correct. So of course that means that the relationship that you build with the board is going to be critical.
Yes.
How will you approach creating that relationship with members of the Board of Supervisors in order to get the most that you can for your office?
I already have a really good relationship with most of the members on the board. It is the case that there may be brand new members come January. So again, I also know everyone who's running and have good relationships with them too. So I'm confident that I will still have a good relationship with most of the members on the board just out of the gate. But I think what's important is respect. Respecting their office, respecting their position, providing them the information that they need, providing them an understanding of that information, answering their questions, not hedging around them, not trying to show that because they have no control over my position in terms of my ability to maintain it, but they still have control over the purse strings. And if they make the purse strings too difficult, they make my job too difficult. And it really is about ultimately respect and providing that two-way street, making them comfortable to come talk to me. When I tell them I'm going to do something, get it done in the time in which I tell them I'm going to do it. Ask the questions that need to be asked. Answer the questions that need to be answered. Not beat around the bush and not treat them like they're second-class citizens because their authority is limited to purse strings. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Okay. I think it's very important to keep the communication open, especially with regards to budgets. In past budgets that I've prepared, you always go before advisory corporate committee that is very similar to the board. Key information that you bring with your budget and key knowledge. It's a lot easier to get that budget approved from a budgetary standpoint. Nobody likes to jump into that type of meeting without information, either the advisory side of it or the person who's preparing the budget. So I think it's very key that you're very explicit in how you prepare it. You provide tons of defense as far as information. As far as on the other side, I have constituents that I know would that they would like certain things to be looked at in certain ways. And that's fine. You need to be open to that conversation as long as there's a respect factor between the two. Because elected official, and there is a reason for it to be elected, it needs to be independent. But that doesn't need to be an adversarial type of relationship. It needs to be a working relationship, and they understand that. They've got other elected officials. But I think it needs to be very much like the other controller, my boss. I think she has a good relationship with the board. She does respond to them. She does her best to be very respectful to them, but she also maintains her independence whenever necessary. And I think I would mirror a lot of that example there. And that's all I think I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to do any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Any other final thoughts? Okay.
No.
We will start back with you then. Next question.
Okay.
What part of the job of assessor recorder do you think will cause you your biggest learning curve?
Okay. To be honest, no matter who takes that office, there's going to be a learning curve. I would say the biggest learning curve will probably be the recorder side. Partly because there is a lot of information. There's over close to 100 different documents that you kind of got to pay attention to. So I think out of all the challenges, I think that would be the biggest challenge. I do think the way to overcome that as quick as possible is to sit down with the people that are actually working in the jobs, which is one thing I would like to do as soon as I interview people, is start sitting with them, start to get a feel, live with them for a day, go through their tasks, work the counter, do those different things that you actually understand what they do and what they touch. Quickest way to actually learn something is actually just to do it. So I do think there's always going to be challenges in taking this job. This is a big, very important job, but I think any of the challenges, as long as you approach it properly, can be overcome. And I think with taking that approach, I think for me, at least, that would be the best approach, given my skills and my talents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorna.
The Office of the Assessor Recorder has been run by Doug Wacker, who has done assessing since, I believe, 1978 and possibly 74. They have a very specific expectation of what Doug can do. They understand his ideology. He's been doing it forever. When it comes to what needs to happen, he's going to be one of the people that when they lose in that office is going to impact how much experience goes out the door. So I think what the biggest challenge that I'm going to have is providing that level of leadership that my staff is going to trust in my answers, because I'm not coming in with 20 plus years of assessment experience the way Doug Wacker is. But I don't think that's unovercomable. In fact, I think it's very overcomable. I'm very personable. I like to hear what other people have to say. I like to empower my employees to do what they need to do, to feel confident in their decisions. I like to have those conversations that are open door, allow people to come tell me what's causing them a concern. I'll help them see how to handle a situation so that they can handle it themselves next time, or maybe the next time after that if they need more attention than that. I think it's all about being able to walk in there and give them enough deference for what they have been doing for so very long and not come in there overpowering and looking like I know everything just because I'm the department head. Instead, use their knowledge, their experience, their expertise, but also look at how we're doing things and how we can do them better, and do it in such a way that everybody is on board rather than come in and talk about change like it's an absolute and everybody is resistant to it. So I think that is primarily the overarching issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, any follow-up?
No, I'm good.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, thank you.
Okay. We're going to go and ask you the next question then. Begin with you, I should say. Both of you bring to this race different skill sets and backgrounds. And so I'd like each of you to take the opportunity here to explain why you think your specific list of abilities, why your background, why your skill sets are really make you best suited to become the next assessor reporter.
So the way I see this position at the end of the day, this is a legal job. It may not have a legal requirement in the code. It may not be necessary that someone be a lawyer in order to do it. But when you look at it at the day-to-day, what needs to be implemented, how it needs to be implemented, and what needs to be considered, it's law. Prop 13 and Prop 8 is what govern assessments in not just Lake County, but all of California. These are legislative and individualized regulations and rules that must be identified, must be followed, must be looked at. But what's very interesting about the law, and anybody who's listening knows, just because it's written one way doesn't mean there's only one interpretation. In fact, in most cases, there are multiple interpretations of even simple words. And it's important that the individual who is doing this position understand those levels of differences, understand where those rules start and stop, but where also is the latitude. California law has a lot of great values to it, but it has a lot of deficiencies. There are a lot of loopholes that are built in order for people to feel comfortable doing things. And when it comes down to that, that is primarily what I think is critical, equally on the recorder side for similar reasons. Also, my background in IT is critical, I think, because we need to look at how can we use the technology that already exists within the office to do things faster and more efficiently. I also think that this position requires somebody who understands the real estate environment in Lake County because of the way assessments are primarily handled here, which is on fair market value. So you need to understand what differences exist within that, as well as the economics of this. This really is a subjective situation, not an objective one, and it truly is more of an economics reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Sure. I actually disagree. I don't think it's a legal job at all. The law that basically are established in the regulations come from the State Board of Equalization. They don't really change for the most part, and this is application of the law. The application of the law is, for the most part, all math and calculations based. The different approaches that you use when you assess a property is market approach, which essentially is fair market value. It's akin to accounting, and it's all over accounting. Next one is cost approach. It's essentially cost accounting. Third was an income approach, which is essentially doing assessing the income that a property generates, and that's how you're taking one of those approaches when you're doing it. When you're dealing with when somebody's building a house and they're in the progress of building that house, it's called construction in progress. A key accounting term. It's also, as you go through that, it's percentage of completion, and you use those different qualifiers as you go through to do these calculations. Almost everything about the job outside of the recorder's office is all math-based. As far as the auditor appraiser position, it requires a accounting position, a CPA, or a proctored exam to, with a high degree of accounting knowledge to even get the certification. The office is actually required to do audits of businesses every single year. They're required to do 7 of them. You cannot do them at all without the auditor appraiser certification. That is required. They are required to do that, and they actually go through audits from the Board of Equalization regarding the same. In fact, they're going through one right now, and that's one of their deficiencies. They do not have anyone currently with an accounting degree or in that position. They've lost the position between the primary and now. I think the skills of an accountant and the way we approach things is key to the application of all those laws. And true, a lot of laws, but this is application law. It's not interpretation of. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorna, any follow-up or rebuttal?
Yes. So my opponent will talk about how the auditor appraiser position requires either, as he says, a CPA license and an undergraduate degree in accounting or a proctored test. What he fails to tell you is that the State Board of Equalization states in the regulation that an elected official has the authority by virtue of said election to do this position. It is that critical differential, it is that inability to understand what the rules are, what the law says, and where those differences come in that concerns me, and why I think it's very important that someone with a legal background is the one doing this position.
Follow-up or rebuttal?
Absolutely. So let me clarify for a second. There are 2 main sides on the assessor side. One is the auditor appraiser, which basically does the personal property tax. So if you own a business, it's basically your chairs, your computers, your couches, that type of stuff. You do a Form 571. The other side is the real property appraiser. Sorna is correct. As the auditor appraiser, you do not have to do any audits. By law, you do not have to do them. But currently, we do not even pay close enough in that position to basically attract an accountant. An accountant from school is making $40,000 a year. We're paying in the 30s. There is no way we're going to get an accountant as an auditor appraiser. Therefore, you will have to work under the certification. And at this point, there's only one person that can bring that to the office, and that's an accountant or a CPA. That's where the clarification is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question we're going to start with you. Throughout the campaign, it's likely that both of you have come across some interesting voter perceptions about the Assessor Recorder's office, the race itself, your own qualifications, or something else that surprised you. Perhaps someone brought to your attention a concern or an issue and caused you to look at something a different way. Anything like that. I'd be curious to have you share one of those experiences with us, something that maybe changed your perception of the race, some piece of information about the race or yourself that wasn't accurate or maybe had been miscommunicated that you'd like to take the opportunity to address here.
Myself?
That's you.
Okay. I think the one that I probably heard the most as I've gone through and talked to people is when there's a Prop 8 reassessment, and when it basically comes back down in value. So as an example, you have a $300,000 house. There's a recession. The value of the house goes down to $200,000. So you do a Prop 8 reassessment. The economy picks back up and the values start coming back up. As they start coming back up, the 2% increase that applies to Prop 13 no longer applies to Prop 8. It can go back up to the adjusted basis. So it could shock a homeowner, basically, because if they went down to 200,000 and all of a sudden the economy picks up, which it does in California sometimes very quickly, it can pick up, it gets to 250, all of a sudden they've got this assessment that's based off 250. And it can be a very high percentage change from the year before. And so that's the one that probably I've heard the most. And I think that's key on make sure that's clarified for everybody, because the economy is picking up. Some of those percentage increases are going to be greater than 2% as things improve. Luckily, in Lake County, it's not improved that drastically that fast, so we probably won't see such sticker shock, but eventually it'll get to the point that it gets back to the base year value. So I think that's the one that's kind of thrown me off. The other, since I have 30 seconds, the one thing that I've pleasantly been surprised as I've been through the campaign trail is to see how many things in Lake County people volunteer for, and how many good things people are trying to do. And to me, I really get a kick of off a lot of those type of things, and I've been very pleasantly surprised as I've gone through it. So I just thought, at 30 seconds, I thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorna.
So let me make sure I understand the question correctly. It has to do with what throughout the campaign trail has surprised me, just in general.
In general,
Okay.
It can be in general. It can be about the perceptions of the office itself, about the race, about your own candidacy. Just something that surprised you and that you think is either affected how you've approached the office, or it was something that you wanted to clarify to voters.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification. You know, most of, if not all of my experiences for the last months and months have been very positive. The support that I'm getting, the conversations that I've had, the information that people have shared with me about their own situations, about what's going on. Many of the things that people have brought to my attention were things I was already aware of. I knew there was a multi-year backlog before I started this. I knew there was an assessment backlog before I started this. Those are the primary issues that people have been addressing again and again. What I didn't know, and what I'm still exploring, is that there's also seems to be a backlog in even exemptions. And that part did surprise me, and I just got wind of that about a week ago. So I'm still looking into to the severity of that issue. And exemptions are different options within the code that provide certain individuals the opportunity to either have a lowered or even in some cases no property tax. A great example of this is our vets who come back from war who are deemed 100% disabled are not obligated to pay property taxes, but they have to file an exemption, they have to meet the criteria, and they have to get that exemption approved. And it is my understanding, talking to certain vet organizations, that there is a backlog in even that issue. And that causes a very big concern, because there are a number of vets out there who know they have that option, who meet the criteria, but are in a financial position in which to still pay their property taxes, know the value of their property taxes, and are continuing to do that because they can. But they can't be waiting 2 years at the point in time that they cannot. So I think that is the biggest thing that I've come across, and was unaware that we were even that vein of backlog as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, any follow-up or
No.
any other thoughts on that?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to start with Sorna. I'm going to allow you to ask Richard a question, and you'll get to do a little bit back and forth.
Sure.
And then then we'll switch. But it starts with you.
So, Rich,
Mm-hmm.
you have spent a lot of time on the campaign trail talking about training. And
Yes.
while I think training is very important, my concern is that with the backlog, to the degree that the backlog is, if everybody is spending all of their time training, who's working?
Sure. I get the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as I've outlined the way I've described the training, there's going to be basically 3 different types of training. First training, let's go over external training. External training, they are required as certified appraisers. They are required to go to different classes for continuing education. I would like to increase that, so yes, there would be some out of office. The second training I've described is cross-training, which basically what cross-training is taking somebody who works in one position, let's say commercial real estate, and is working over in residential for the day or for a week. So the work is still getting done. The difference is you're cross-training them so that down the road, if there's any shortfall in staff, you have the way to essentially keep the work going. The third way is employees training employees. How I've described this is basically I will give somebody a topic. I will send them off for a half hour or an hour. They will go, they will research it, and they'll come back and they'll teach the group in about 15 minutes in a staff meeting. So as far as downtime, there's not going to be a lot of downtime on training. What I do think is very important is that the training starts and this training continues. When an employee trains the group, I'm not naive in thinking that everybody in the group is going to pick up exactly as the employee trains them. But what I am very aware of is the quickest way for somebody to get knowledge is to actually train somebody else. So if they have to go and they have to research the subject and come back and train the group, they will be an expert more in the office. I think that's key to bring that knowledge back in, and it's also key to give people confidence in that knowledge. And that's my way to do it. So I don't think there's going to be really much difference on who's going to be doing the work. The work is going to basically operate as is. Thank you.
Do you want to do any follow-up question on that? Okay.
My question?
It's your turn now.
Okay, so only question I have is, you know, you've touted your legal background, and I just want to know, you've gone to school for a long time, you're a lawyer, why aren't you making a living as a full-time lawyer?
I have the opportunity to do things for the community, and that is more important to me than making hundreds of thousands of dollars being a lawyer. I'm a very good lawyer. I was doing very well in San Francisco. I was doing well here, but I've been given opportunities that permit me to use my skills, use my background, and give back to my community. I was brought up in a family where community service was more important than the dollar, and I use that every day. Right now, I have an opportunity to use my legal background and help youth. That is more important to me than the dollars I can earn as an attorney. There's really not much more to go into than that. I have the luxury of always being able to use my law license. My law license will never go anywhere. I will always do what is necessary to keep it accessible to myself, do my MCLEs, make it an option for myself. But I find that providing services to people is what is critical. And I think it's one of the things that within this society is lacking. We don't do enough as much as you have recognized the amount of volunteerism that's in Lake County, and it is huge, and it is very great that it is as big as it is. As a society, we do not do enough to help our fellows. And I think it's much more important to do that than worry about whether or not I'm making $100, $200, $300 an hour.
Any follow-up?
No.
Okay, now we're going to go into closing statements. 2 minutes to sum up anything we haven't covered. We have covered a lot of ground tonight. And this can be anything you guys want to address. We're going to start with Swarna.
Okay, so thank you again for spending what I'm not sure exactly how much time this has elapsed, but probably close to an hour listening to us this evening or this morning, depending on when you have an opportunity to look at it. I think what's important to understand is that my opponent and I are very different. We have very different philosophies on how to solve the challenges in the office. We have very different backgrounds coming into this. But what I think is critical to understand is that this job is very important. It's important to the county. It's important to you, even if you are not a homeowner, even if you are not a business owner, because how this job gets done matters, and it matters down the road, and it matters to services that are provided. So I do think it's something that does require attention. Having said that, when I look at what this job entails day in and day out, the economic requirements of it, the subjective nature of fair market value, the reality that goes into what needs to be assessed, the reality of what goes into how we record documents so that we can address these issues such as MERS. These are things that all require somebody with multiple skills to bring to the table, who can look at things from many different angles, many different avenues, who has experience problem solving, who has experience with workflow process, who has an experience solving similar type problems in other agencies within the county, and who can look at all of that and know that at the end of the day it's important that my constituency are the ones who are being taken care of. I also want to address one thing that Mr. Ford had said earlier. My campaign and I contacted the Board of Equalization, the State Board of Equalization, and confirmed what we understood in code, which was regardless of whether you're talking personal or business, the mere fact of the elected position is strictly laid out in code as an individual qualified to do the auditor appraiser position. And quite frankly, with my background in accounting, I would be willing to even take the proctor test that the county gives just to give myself that extra leap. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Sure. So in closing, the Office of the Assessor Recorder has some challenges, as we know. And these challenges will be solved easily or quickly. I feel that this office should also be handled quietly. I think about it as any larger organization I've dealt with. When the finance accounting portion of that organization is being done well, you don't hear about it. When it is done very poorly, that's all you hear about. That's how I think this office should be handled. I don't think this office should be politicized. I actually feel we just need to get the job done. I think bringing knowledge back to the office through training will prepare us for now and for the future. I think having document policies and procedures and a clear training environment that actually allows people to grow, where they continually learn, will basically help the team become more cohesive. It'll allow us to retain more of the employees. I also feel that my accounting skills and training will be a good fit for this office, basically due to some of the things we've already outlined. As many have noticed, I'm not a flashy guy. I'm probably not the best speaker. And I'm not really, as you've seen from most of my advertising, I don't really use catchy political phrases. I'm an accountant. Most of my personality basically mirrors being an accountant. I try to put out a consistent message throughout this process regarding my qualifications and where I see the needs and where I think we need to solve the needs. I feel that one of the greatest characteristics of any leader is humility and not search for public praise. I think this character trait will be needed in this role. In the end, I would hope that you would look at both candidates, send them to a job interview, and pick the best person for the job. I would also ask that whoever wins this election, we all support them in the role. Thank Elizabeth and John for putting the debate on, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure to sit down with you and hear a little bit more about where you're coming from. I know it's been a long campaign season, and it's just about over.
Yes.
And I'll look forward to hopefully sitting down with the next assessor recorder early next year after they've gotten their boots on the ground to see how things are going. Check in with one or the both of you, and I expect we'll be following up with both of you at some point because you're both very active in the community. So thank you again to Sornalee Jordan and Richard Ford for joining us tonight. Thank you for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.